mind standing, or some of you who sat down, John, please stand. Uh, I'm going to read today's teaching text. It is Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 through 17. It says, "A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, 'Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you will dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury, because he knows that his time is short.' When the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle, so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a time, times, and half a time, out of the serpent's reach. And then from his mouth the serpent spewed water like a river, to overtake the woman and sweep her away with the torrent. But the earth helped the woman by opening its mouth and swallowing the river that the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's commands and hold fast to their testimony about Jesus. This is the word of the Lord."
One's good. This one? Oh, wait. Ha! I fixed it. Guys, that's the Holy Spirit. So yeah, we are in this series in Revelation, and if you're just joining us, I'm going to warn you, this is weird stuff. And I'm not trying to demystify it because I think it's really beautiful stuff, but I think we have to kind of understand so much of what's going on. And if you're new with us, I was kind of debating about how to do this, but I think we have to kind of go back to the setting. I remember a few weeks ago, we went to go see Wicked, the musical. Anybody seen this musical? I don't know if pastors are supposed to go see musicals called Wicked, but we did, and it's great. It's the pre-story of how you get the Wicked Witch from the West in The Wizard of Oz, and how she kind of came to be. And so it's kind of like this like pre-story to what happened to her, and kind of lays out who she is. If you've not seen it, it's a great musical. It's really fun. But we were there. My whole family was there. We took the kids. We're there, and we're sitting in the theater at the Straz. And right before the show started, my son looks at me. He's like, I can't see. Like, I can't see past the people in front of us. And they have those little booster seats so that you can kind of, like the phone book, essentially, that you can put him on. And so I was like, I'll just run out and grab one real quick. quick. And the show is right about to start, but I was like, so I go down the whole row, and you know how it is, like you're passing every single person. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. And you're like, I'm so sorry. I just put my rear end in every person's face that I just walked by, and there's no other way to do it. And so I get out, and I'm like, and I look at the person who's standing by the door, the attendant there, and I'm like, I just need to grab one of those booster seats. She's like, they're right there. I was like, but the show's about to start. And she was like, it's fine. Just run out and grab it. I'll hold the door. You can come back in. And so I run as fast as I can to go grab the booster seat. I run to the front. I grab the seat like I'm in like a supermarket sweep moment, or like I'm all in on this thing. And I grab it. I start running as fast as I can back to the door. And I kid you not, as I'm running back, they close the doors in front of me. And I was like, you said I was going to hold the door and I was going to be able to get back in. They were like, no, we can't let you in now. I was like, well, is this supposed to go into the show? Because I have the seat, and I have a seat in there too, and I'm supposed to sit in that one, and this is for my son. And they were like, you can't go in there. And they're like, we have a set time of, and if you've ever been to a musical, you know how this works, but there's a set time where you're not allowed to go in. It distracts the actors, kind of it stops you from seeing the whole scene. And so what happens is they have a designated time after the first set where you can go in, but it's like 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes into the show. And I'm like, well, I'm supposed to be in there. I want to go in there. They're like, there's a screen over there you can go watch it on. I was like, well, I didn't pay to watch it on a screen. I could do that. I could do that bootlegged anytime I want on YouTube, I'm pretty sure. And so I was like, well, okay. So I go over to a screen. And I was standing there with I have the booster seat under my arm. And another guy comes up, and he is yelling at the attendant. Like he is furious with her. He's like, I paid for those seats. And she was like, I totally understand that you paid for the seats. He's like, well, I'm supposed to be in there. And finally, she directs him to the same spot I'm in. So now me, an angry guy, are hanging out together, and he is just yelling at this screen. He's like, what's this? What's happening in there? Now, I've seen the show before. Fortunately, I knew a little bit about what was going on, and so I kind of understood what was happening. But as he's watching it, he's watching all for the first time. Apparently, he didn't know anything about the show. He's like, why is that baby being born? There's a baby being born. I was like, yeah, there sure is a baby being born. It's like, why is that baby being born right now? Now, he'd had some things to drink, I'm pretty sure. And he finally yells out, as the baby is being born, if you know, there's like this world, this mystical world set up where witches exist and where witches go to school to be witches. And there's kind of this whole mystical and mythical thing that's created. What are the rules of this world? How does this world work? And all of a sudden, in the midst of all that, they're showing you all of that in song and how it all comes together kind of poetically. And then all of a sudden, this baby is born in the midst of it. And the baby is born, and the baby comes out with a green face. And I kid you not, he yells out. He's like, where did that baby come from? What is that, like the daughter of Kermit or something? And I was like, and I looked at him, I was like Kermit the Frog? He was like, yeah, it's got a green face. And I was like, yeah, I didn't think of that option, but I mean, I don't think so, but maybe. And and so he doesn't know the rules. He doesn't know how it's all set up. There's a setting he's missed, and this baby's being born. He doesn't understand the story behind it, where it's all coming from. What's happening in this bit of Revelation? First of all, we have to look at it as its totality. Look at the setting. What is the world in which this is set? What are the rules around it? How is this thing all coming to be? And then we have to understand, now that we know that, what is it saying to us? What is being presented? But the setting is radically important. In this whole thing of Revelation, we cannot forget where it comes from. So first of all, who is writing it? A guy named John. And John apparently at the time was a popular name. I hear it is now too. Right? John, I'm sure you were the only John in your class, right? John and John. Notice that already. We already have a problem. And I'm sure you were the only John M in your class, right? Like there's always another John M, right? You were always invited to the birthday party. Are we inviting John M and John R? Like whatever it was, right? There's always another John. So John is writing this. It may be John, the disciple who followed Jesus, John who writes the book of John, the Gospel of John. I actually don't think it is. The more I've kind of looked at it in the Greek and tried to understand it, I don't think that is probably who's writing it. But a guy named John, who is a devoted follower of Jesus. He's out on this island of Patmos, which is in the middle of nowhere. And what he's writing to is a group of people who have given up hope on Jesus. I don't know how else to say it, and there's no nice way to say it. There are people that have given up on this gospel of Jesus. Remember that Jesus, when he leaves this earth, he leaves and people think that Jesus should come back and I don't know, when he goes away. In fact, if you read the end of Acts, Jesus ascends to heaven. It actually says the disciples watched him go up. Like I would love to watch this, like a cosmic Dyson is just sucking Jesus up into heaven or whatever. And as he's going up, it says they just watched him and they just kept watching. And finally he leaves, he's gone. The clouds have come, they've parted and they've come back together. It says the disciples are still watching, wonder when he's coming back. And finally, angels have to come out and be like, hey, he's not coming back right now. You need to leave. A lot of people believed he would come back almost instantly. Or that he would come back within 3 days. How hard can it be? If you can conquer the grave in 3 days, why can't you come back to earth in 3 days? Doesn't seem like it'd be that hard. I've watched Fast and Furious, and they have one movie where they go into space with a car. And you're thinking, if they can take a car into space and it drives, they're steering it like the wheels have traction. It's great. Watch these movies. They're so great. They're not like good, but they're great. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, and so I've seen that. If they can get that into space, then how hard can it be for Jesus to go up into space and into the heavens and then come back down for us here on earth? How hard can that be? Some people thought it'd be 40 days. That's how long Jesus was back after he rose from the dead. He came back to earth for 40 days. 40 days, how long he fasted in the desert. 40 years, how long the Israelites were in the desert. I mean, most people thought that's going to be what it is, 40 days. Once 40 days pass, what do? A year passes, 2 years pass. At this point, we're at about 70 years. And you're like, where is this guy? People have given up. They don't know what to do with it, and they're now being persecuted at a level that we will never understand. But being literally murdered, literally tortured, literally losing jobs, economic status, losing any ability to take part in their community. They are losing all those things, and they're going, where is this guy? He promised he'd come back. Where is he? And so John's writing to a group of people that do not understand what's happening. They're trying to figure out, does he still win? Do we still win? How does this whole thing work? Because I'm starting to give up hope. He's writing to a group of people that are very discouraged at this point. And when he writes to them, remember that he's writing in this style called apocryphal literature, something we don't understand. There is no one-for-one in English to apocryphal literature. But John writes in the very first book, or very first verse of the very first chapter of this book, he says this is a revelation from Jesus Christ. It's a revelation. That's where we get the word revelation for this book. It is a revelation. That word means apocalypsis in Greek. That's what the word is. Again, it's not apocalyptic. We hear apocalyptic. We think that it's like the end of the world. It's all these terrible things happening. We picture zombie apocalypses or some kind of I need to go down in the bunker now that I've been building for the last 30 years. Whatever it is, we view apocalypse as this Armageddon type of situation. It's not the same thing. The word apocalypse in Greek, literally, again, we've talked about this before, it just means laying bare or making something naked or disclosing the truth. Here's what you see, but here's the thing behind that curtain. Here's the piece behind that piece. Here's the bigger story. And what John does here is he creates this massive expanse. It is greater, it is grander than anything we see. We only see glimpses here on earth, and what he does is he pulls back the curtain. He says, there's a whole battle, there's a whole scene that you can't see, and it's happening behind all these other things. It's the animating forces of what we're doing, but it's also not something that you can see directly. You can only see the effects of it. For many of us, it's like the wind. We see the effects of the wind. We do not see the wind, right? It's all these motivating factors, effects, and forces that are happening before all this stuff. And he really opens the curtain for us, much like a wizard at the end of Oz, and says, this is what's really going on behind it. And today, as we go through this, that's my hope, is that we picture this battle and this moment we're going to see in a broader sense than we've ever understood it, and understand what's really going on behind the scenes, so that we understand where we are right now. In the series so far, just if you've not been with us, I would encourage you to go back and really kind of go through some of the other ones. Last week was a slog. I apologize. I mean, it was a lot to get through. I think we went through we went through 5 chapters of Revelation essentially last week. So thanks for bearing with me. But as we go through it, you see that first bit where we kind of look at the letters. We look at kind of where that whole thing comes from. John writing this apocalyptic literature. Then he starts to write those letters to 7 churches. Then we see that there is a lamb. Remember, there's this lamb at the center of worship. Everything bows down to what we think is going to be a lion, but what turns out to be a lamb. And that lamb is the center of all these things. A slaughtered lamb is the one who rules all things in heaven and on earth. And then the next part we see is 7 scrolls, that there's these 7 seals on the scroll. The lamb's trying to open this scroll. It's the only one who can, and nobody else can open the scroll. And there's a scroll with 7 seals, and then that leads to 7 trumpets, okay? I know that's all weird stuff, and you can go back and watch it. Today, though, there's this little parentheses that happen in the middle of Revelation. And what happens in chapters 12 through 14, it just kind of stops. And all this activity kind of takes a breath. And that's where we're at today. Today's going to be a lot lighter in some ways because it kind of gives us this little breath. And then we're going to go into later on, not next week, but the week after, we'll get into the 7 bowls and all the other big things. But this little set piece is a little bit different. And today we're going to look at what is this cosmic battle going on? What is the thing behind the curtain? What is the big picture? Because what that informs is why. Like, why is all this happening? Next week, we're going to look at the battle that moves from that place of cosmic battle to the battle that's here on earth and the battle we're dealing with all the time. And that's more of a what. What do we do with this now? And how have we responded to the cosmic battle? Next week, we'll get into that. Next week, it will be, this week, we're going to give America a break. But next week, just so you know, because it's the 4th of July, we should probably give it a break. But next week is when we get into a little bit of this deeper stuff of nationalism and the things that come with tribalism and the things that we really see being detrimental to Rome and Babylon and therefore places like, I don't know, empires like our own. So that'll be a fun one. Buckle in for that one. I'm sure I'll get some emails after that one. But today we're going to look at kind of the picture behind the picture, the story behind the story. Now, don't get confused. There are two signs in one scheme in this. Two signs in one scheme. And here's the thing. Like, I know that many of us, we grew up listening to Ace of Base, and we know that I saw the sign, and it opened up my eyes. But I saw the sign. And I'm so sorry that that's now stuck in your head for the rest of the day. You're not going to walk out of here without that song being in your head. I apologize. But that idea is that the sign, if you know anything about any literature at all, the sign is not the thing. The sign is just a distraction from a thing, or a sign is pointing to something else, right? So a sign is more of something that is pointing to something else. It's not the thing itself. So the signs that are happening in there's two signs. There's going to be a woman and a dragon. Do not let them, don't think that they are the main point of what's happening here. They are just pointing to the scheme. Two signs pointing to one scheme. The scheme is what we want to pay attention to. So if you have a Bible, I would encourage you to come with me on this journey in Revelation chapter 12. Revelation 12, we're going to go straight through what Billy just read for us, and we're going to kind of try to take this apart and understand it for ourselves today, where we're at and why this matters, okay? So Revelation chapter 12, where John writes this. So here's the first sign. A great sign appeared in heaven. It's a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. Now, we don't have time to really go into that and why that matters. It doesn't, is kind of the biggest point. Do not get too caught up on all these numbers and all these different symbols. But what it means is that she has authority. She's clothed with the sun. Some people would point this back to early matriarchs in the Bible, that we see this happen. We all see it with Joseph when he writes about this. But the sun and the moon and all these things. Remember, nothing in Revelation is unique to Revelation. Almost every verse is pointing to something in the Old Testament or something that's already been written. It's not unique. So most of this is probably pointing back to Joseph in Genesis chapter 12, or Genesis chapter 26. Sorry, somewhere in there. But it's about this clothed in the sun thing. And the moon's under her feet. There's a crown of 12 stars, which is like a number, like all the different elders or all the different tribes are on her head. So she holds this place of authority. And then it says she's pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Now, you might be like, who is the woman? So we want to know, like what we all want to know. Who is this woman? Give us like a name. Who is he talking about? Now, some people would argue that this is actually Eve, that this goes all the way back to Genesis. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. We almost see this battle starting to happen in Genesis 3, right? So a serpent comes along, which a serpent, if you're not familiar, was basically a dragon it's a dragon without the wings. But a serpent comes along, and he fools a woman. He tricks this woman. We can talk more about that later. But as he tricks this woman, or he kind of lies to her, he creates this web of deceit. Did God really say? What happens right there, there's a verse that God sets up almost like there's going to be a battle between you two for eternity. He says, I'll put an enmity between you and the woman, and your offspring will fight hers, and he will crush your head. You will strike his heel. You guys are going to fight back and forth forever. So is this going back to Eve? Is it Israel? Some people believe this is Israel. And I believe this is kind of an elastic term, but is it Israel? Are they birthing essentially this Savior, this Messiah that's going to come out of them? Is that what this means? Is it Mary, who's literally birthing Jesus into the world? She's going to birth a child into the world. Or is it the church, the modern church, who is supposed to birth Jesus into this world? And the answer to that probably is yeah. Yeah. It could be any of those. Because what I want you to see is that all these, the reason they're pictures, the reason they're not exact details, is so that you have to wrestle with these things and think it could be all of these things. they're elastic terms. And what I mean by that is they're one size fits all. You can stretch them out and make them fit other things. But the goal is that they're anybody who is trying to bring Jesus and the way of Jesus into this world. Anybody who's trying to do that. Does that make sense? Like Paul even writes about this, right? Paul in Galatians has that verse. This is Paul, by the way. He says, "Dear children, for whom I again in the pains of childbirth until Christ is formed in you." This is Paul. Remember, Paul's a dude, like a full-on dude. And he says, "I am in the pains of childbirth." Why is he in the pains of childbirth? And it's not like maybe he had gas that day. I don't know. He may have eaten something he shouldn't have. He's like, man, that Indian food was a bad choice. But he's like, but at that moment, he's like, I'm in the pains of childbirth. Why? Until Christ is formed, which is actually the same word, morphu, the word like we get like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers from Morphin. Like it's being born, it's being formed in you. Anybody who Christ is being formed in, that's who we're talking about. And it's hard work to have Christ formed in you because he's going to take up space in your life and residence in your life. He's going to change things in your life. That's what's going to happen. And when those things start to happen, it's going to be difficult and there's going to be an enemy who's going to attack. So who is this woman? Yeah, all of the above. It's anyone who is trying to bring Christ into this world. But then another sign appears. There's an enemy who's going to come and attack that. Another sign appears in heaven, an enormous red dragon. And the dragon had 7 heads and 10 horns with 7 crowns on its head. So anyways, you picture what you want there. It's big, it's mean, it's got lots of authority. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky, flung them to the earth. Remember, we kind of saw this in the 7 seals and all that stuff, this third language. We don't know exactly what he means by this, but this third language probably means something like there's a third of things that happen. He didn't fully destroy everything, but he tried, or a lot happened. It was darker. He flings the stars out of the sky. He's causing chaos. And then it says, the dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that it might devour her child the moment it was born. That's what it's trying to do. There is an enemy to this woman. It's there right off the bat. And it comes to try to devour the child the moment that it's born. Michael Gorman, who wrote Reading Revelation Responsibly, which is a great read on this book if you have time to read it, he says this: the dragon and its 2 minions are some of the most vivid characters in the apocalyptic drama. Like, these characters matter. They're very vivid. He goes on and he tries to describe what's going on here in the moment. He says, he's not only the deceiver, but also the ultimate persecutor of God's people. Notice he's there waiting at that moment. He's the persecutor of God's people, including the Messiah. He's the persecutor not just of us, but of the Messiah himself. Though his persecution can also be executed. I want you to see this. It can also be executed by humans who think they are doing God's will. Sometimes we're on the team that we think we're on the wrong team. We think we're on a certain team, and it turns out we're on a different one. Sometimes we're actually doing the will of the enemy when thinking we're doing the will of the Messiah. And I don't know if you've seen this in our culture on everyday type of basis. I mean, how many times have you heard the people saying, well, this group is too inclusive, so I hate them. And by hating them, I guess I'm proving that they're too inclusive, or vice versa. It also happens on the other side. I can't tell you how many people think that they want somebody to come to know Jesus, so they disapprove of them. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, we disapprove of them, and we show them, I'm not showing up to that thing. I'm not coming to your aid. I'm not going to be there for you because that's your problem, but I wish you knew the love of Jesus. How else are they going to know? It's this circular reasoning. We think we're on the right team, and it turns out maybe we're on the wrong one. Maybe we're doing the plans of the devil. I'm just saying, Here's what I love about the way Revelation is written. I've mentioned this before, but it reanimates who the person or the animating force is behind all of this. It changes the picture for us that the person or the thing that you think you're against is not a person or a thing. Most likely, there is an animating force behind that. There is a dragon, a Satan, a something behind that is causing that. When I really think about this, if I were to, if I thought about how many conflicts I've had with people that I do not like, people that I disagree with, enemies, if you will, and maybe you have some people like that in your life, I don't know. I'm sure I'm the only one. But I have people like that. And there are people that I strongly disagree with, people I do not like, people that have hurt me or harmed me. But when I think of what really is the issue between me and them, if I'm being honest with myself, what is the issue between me and them? Like, honestly, is it really that they are just a bad person? Is it really that they are just less than me and I am better than them? Is it really that they've just done outright evil to me? And sometimes maybe. But when I think of the real animating issue between me and them, if I'm being honest, it usually is sin. Between at least one of us, probably both of us. If I'm being honest, you know what's done the most damage between us? Is not them as a person. If I'm being honest, this is just me, maybe it's not you. My pride has done more damage than any words they've said between our relationship. Why? Because maybe their words hurt my pride, and therefore I felt like I needed to respond in a certain way. My greed, my greed, and I don't mean greed just like financially, but like my greed, like my need to, whatever it is, be accepted, be wanted, be liked. That part of me, if I'm being honest, that's probably done more damage in a relationship or in any other interaction with somebody than just them as a person. Does that make sense? I would say in our culture, lust has done more damage between people. I know that sounds crazy, but it's done more damage because it's led to relationships that are dangerous. It's led us into places where we see people as objects instead of humans. Lust has done more between humans than anything that just the simple humans have done. Do you see what I'm saying? There's an animating force behind this. And it's an accuser, it's a Satan who is creating problems between us, and that's all just sin. And we have to be able to pull the curtain back. That's what John's trying to do here, is say this isn't just as simple as you think it is. It's not just that they said something mean and you took it as offense. There's sin in the midst of that, and there's somebody who's brought that sin into the world, and they're actively trying to bring more of it because it's going to cause more conflict and more chaos between you. Does that make sense? Are you following me on this? And I'm sure I'm the only one dealing with this. But as I realize that about myself, what it makes me realize is that sin is the issue, they are not the issue. This accuser, this dragon, this Satan is the issue. They are not the issue. I have to remove that and realize where the issue really comes from. And sometimes by thinking that I am doing the right thing, I turn out to do the wrong thing because I haven't confronted the sin, but I have confronted the person. Anybody else done this? I haven't confronted the sin in my own life that has led to this issue or escalated this issue. Haven't confronted that because I don't want to do that. Instead, I just confront them as a person. How many of us, when we have conflicts like this, first confront the sin in our own lives? I would say almost zero. I've not met anybody, including me, because my first reaction is to actually escalate the sin. By that, I mean what my gut reaction, this is just me, I don't know what you do. Some of you, I know, like some of you, you get confronted by somebody, something falls apart, something happens. Your like gut reaction is to like cry or get mad or whatever it is, right? For me, it is I puff up. My first thing is I escalate the sin, which is pride. My sin is always going to be pride. I'm just going to be honest with you, just across the board. You name something that's a problem in my life, it starts with pride. I'm going to puff up. I'm going to escalate the sin instead of de-escalate the sin and and confront the person. I'm going to escalate the sin and confront the person. But I'm not going to confront the sin first. I'm going to confront the person first. Do you see why this matters? We have to confront the sin first, because otherwise we're playing right into this enemy's hands. We're doing exactly what he wants us to do. And he's smart, and he's crafty, and he's been that way since the beginning. So right after that, we see that she does give birth. So there's still a victory here. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. That's straight out of the Psalms. That's where that comes from. And it says, and her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. So Eugene Peterson kind of writes it this way, where he sees this part of this really about being about Mary, about this birthing of Jesus. He says, this is not the nativity story we grew up with, but it is the nativity story all the same. Which, can you imagine like going to, I don't know, a Christmas cantata, and there's like a red dragon on stage? What is happening here? It'd be a real messed up thing, but I'm kind of interested in trying it this year. So if anyone wants to be a part of our cantata here at Restoration, it could be really fun. Okay, all right, good. We got one. So yeah, I feel like this could be really exciting, but that's what he's saying. This is the nativity. It is the birthing of Jesus into the world. This conflict is being escalated at this moment. And it says, and her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. And then the woman fled into the wilderness to a place prepared for her by God where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. Very specific amount of days. Now, let's take this apart really quickly. First of all, 1,260 days. So that's, we saw it later on this passage. What that is when it says things like, okay, so there's a passage that says time, and then it says times, and then it says in half time, or it says times, time, and a half time, which I know that sounds very confusing. That happens actually here in Revelation. It also happens in Daniel, twice in Daniel. Remember, again, nothing in Revelation is unique to Revelation, really. So in Daniel, he uses this prophetic language of times, time, and a half time. What that means is that they operated on an annual, their year was a 360-day year in the Hebrew calendar. And so they would do a 360-day year. So what they would do is they would say times is 2 years. So take 360, multiply it by 2. Then time, add another 360 to that, 720. And now we're going to get to a half time, which is half a year. So 180. That's how we get 1,260 days. Does that, I know it's weird. That's where we get that number from. So, but that phrase has been used by Daniel. So John's not just writing it to be like, some people really believe that there is a tribulation or a waiting period of 1,260 years. That must be what it means. Well, first of all, he had the word years in his disposal. He didn't use it. Just so you know, like if you wanted to be exact, he could have, and we would have missed it already. But that's not what's going on here. It's saying there's a long time. There's a long time where she goes to the wilderness. Now, this battle, what's going to happen here, when she goes to the wilderness, it's actually, we read it as maybe, some people read it this way, where they think she's going away into a place that is like she's fleeing from something, right? And she's scared. It does say she's fled. But it also it goes to the wilderness. Some people believe she's in hiding. So like this baby, this child, the Messiah, is in hiding for a certain amount of time. I would actually say that's probably not the way the readers read it. If you've been around here for a while, you know that this word wilderness is a Greek word that's the word eremos. Eremos means a quiet place, like the movie with John Krasinski. It's like a silent place. It means like a lonely place that is uninhabited. In fact, anyways, it's where people would go in the Old Testament, where Moses went and Elijah went. All these different people when they met with God, that's where they went, was to the quiet place, to the eremos. And what's interesting is it was one of Jesus' favorite places to go. Right? He went there all the time to pray. He would go withdraw to quiet places. I would say most readers here are not seeing this as a place of fear, but it's a place where you go to get power. It's a place you go to get stronger. It's a place you go that is the place of refuge, but also a place where you are renewed in this spirit. And so it's a good thing that she does this, not something that's bad. And what we're going to see, so this story, by the way, is not unique. And I just think I need to say this just for your own sake, in case you ever come across this. This story is not unique, by the way. In Greek mythology was being passed around a lot at this time. And there are multiple stories of this same thing happening. In fact, when Apollo was born to Zeus and to Leto, not Jared, but like another Leto, and they had a child, and that child was Apollos, and they actually had the exact same story in Greek literature was told. They had a battle with a dragon. Their dragon's name was Python, which is a weird name for a dragon, seems pretty on the nose. But Python fought with them, and then Leto, eventually when she has Apollos, flees into a desert place. Like that's what she does. She actually goes to a city that they would have known. She runs away to that city, Dolos. But Dolos was also a place that was known for its strength. It was a it was a military fortress. So like if you come across this, what's happening and why that's happening is because John, when he's writing this, if you remember anything about what's happening here, people that read Christian literature would be murdered. They would be killed. John is drawing off of Greek mythology because he's writing something that if you read it, you could read it saying this about Jesus, but you also could be like, man, this is about a dragon and a woman. What a weird story. You wouldn't get murdered for this, maybe. You might be able to have this whole story play out and never have it be about Jesus. He's using the tools at his disposal, okay? There's even older stories, by the way. Isis in Hebrew or in Egyptian culture, same type of story happens there. So he's drawing off of this, trying to show us what's happening. But either way, what I want you to see is, remember, don't get caught up on those two signs. Look at the scheme behind it. Look at the one who's behind it. And it says this, after that, a war. This war breaks out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he, the dragon, was not strong enough. They lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down. That ancient serpent called the devil or Satan, who leads the whole world astray, he was hurled to the earth and his angels with him. There's victory here. In fact, I kind of love in the Greek, the word hurled there is actually a word that means, it means bounced, which is just kind of fun. Like he was bounced, like he was bounced out of heaven, like he was a spam email coming into your Gmail folder or whatever. Like he was just bounced, he was out of there. I love it. So he's bounced out of heaven. And there is now this place that comes around, and there's this victory that's being seen. And this is important for us to remember. There is victory that's in this moment. I don't know about you, like, are there moments, like if you're being honest with yourself, are there moments where you kind of wonder if we still win? Like, be honest with yourself. Like, I know we come in here and we sing songs like, you're never gonna let me down. But like, there are days where you're like, I'm kind of let down. I mean, right? I mean, like, that's why this is being written. This matters. Because for our souls, we kind of need to know that there is still victory. I mean, I was just this last, a couple weeks ago, we were at, my wife and kids did a play. It was, they did an Aladdin show. It was great. It was super fun. And I saw some friends there before the show that I hadn't seen in a long time. And they came up to me and they were talking to me and they were really excited. And one of them, she said, ask her how her son was doing. I see on Facebook that he's not doing well. They have a son, he's 5 years old. He was diagnosed with leukemia. And it's been a very difficult battle for him. I asked how he's doing, and she tried to give me the Christian answer because I'm a pastor. I could feel it. Like she's like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And she says, it's been really hard, and we've had a really hard time financially. It's a big struggle. He's dealing with a lot still. He still hasn't fully recovered. He's 5 years old. He wants to be a normal boy, just doing boy things, but he can't do those things. He can't be around people who are also, like, who might be sick. He can't be around people who are at his school. He can't do normal things yet. He's not physically active yet, and he's really struggling, and they're afraid there might be more coming. And she looks at me, and she goes, but God always wins, right? She said this line, and I mean, like, I'll be honest with you. When I heard it, it cut me to the core. Because I want to be like, yeah. But I mean, like, I'll just be honest with you. This is just my cynical nature. I mean, I was 9 years old and my dad died. A pastor who everybody loved. He did all the right things. And he died. Oh, God always wins, right? I mean, have you ever thought about this? Like, it's a scary thing to think that we do the Christian answers all the time. God's got this. Let go and let God. I mean, that's a good one, by the way. You know. In fact, we're going to use that in the cantata this year. But I mean, that's our ideals, right? We just kind of throw these words out there and it sounds good, but do we believe that? Like at the core of us, do we live that way? Do we actually believe that? And why this matters is John is pulling back the curtain saying, I know you've given up hope. I know that there's a part of you that does not actually believe or live as though this is true. But there's a bigger battle being fought, and you're only seeing a small glimpse of it, and it's only the part on earth that you're capturing. You're only getting that small bit. The few years you get on this earth, that's all you're seeing. But there's a cosmic battle, and it's so much bigger, and I got good news. I got good news, because this dragon, he doesn't win. He doesn't win. And that means the good news, this is why the resurrection matters. We don't talk about it all the time, but that's why it matters. It's because if that was the end, if death was the end, then guess what? He did win. But it's not the end. There's more to this. There's something beyond this, and he has won that part. He's won the cosmic battle. And it mattered to them then, and it matters to us now. And so what happens after that? There is this triumphal victory speech that is given from heaven. And it reveals some things about who this is that we're dealing with. And these are important things for us to understand. So let's read through this real quick, and then we'll come back through it for just a second. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven, and this voice reveals, now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and his sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, he has been hurled down. He's been bounced. They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the whole world of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. Do you see this? It's bigger than just death. There's a cosmic battle that he wins. Therefore rejoice, you heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has gone down to you. He is filled with fury because he knows that his time is short. And when the dragon saw that he had been hurled to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. The woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her again in the wilderness, where she would be taken care of for a time, times, and a half time out of the serpent's reach. So we find out some things that are revealed about this enemy. And I think what's important for us to know is that he has left heaven. He lost the cosmic battle, but guess where he went? He's on earth. And he's still doing stuff. He's still active. What I want you to see is there's a few things just really quickly I want us to take note of before we go too far. So these are what is being revealed. If this is a revelation, this is what the revelation is telling us. First of all, he is the accuser. He is the accuser. Notice this in verse 10. It says, then I heard that loud voice in heaven saying, now come the power and the salvation of God, the kingdom of God, and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters who accuses them before God day and night has been hurled down. So did you notice this? Like that there's an accuser. And remember that Satan's name is Ha-Satan. That's what the word is. Every time you see Satan, Satan is not a proper name. It's not like his name is Satan Smith or whatever. Like it's not a name. It's not a proper name. It is just a title, which really means the accuser or the enemy. That's what it means. But basically, it's like a courtroom term for somebody who would come in as the prosecutor. That's what the name means. Every time in the Bible you see it, by the way, it is the Satan. That's his name. He's the accuser. He is constantly accusing. And his name is important because what he brings to the table is that he accuses people all the time. He's constantly accusing people. And I think that's interesting because what happens right off the bat, like think about what happens in Genesis, like beginning of the Bible. What happens with this Satan? He comes along and he tempts Adam and Eve with this little mistruth, right? This little lie that he gives. Did God really say you cannot eat from this tree? Did God really say that? It's the first time he says that. And they kind of are like, maybe he didn't. Just a little lie, just a little white lie, nothing big. And then they take part of this, and what happens instantly after they eat of the fruit? What happens? They have the knowledge of good and evil, and what happens in that moment? They instantly feel shame. I want you to know something about God. I believe this with all my heart. Shame is not of God. Shame is a byproduct of sin, but it is not of God. It comes from sin, not from God. We use, and maybe you grew up in a tradition like this, in a religious tradition, we use shame in the church all the time as though it is. We'll shame you for anything we think is shameful. We love to use it as a weapon. Guess whose weapon it is? It's not ours, it's his. It's the enemy's weapon. He uses shame. If we are using it, we are falling right into his trap because he is the one who authors and finishes shame, where Jesus authors and finishes what? Life? If I'm not mistaken? Not shame. Shame is, in my opinion, if Satan was his first name, shame would be his middle. It'd be Hasatan, Shame Smith. He's probably not a Smith. If anybody's named Smith in here, he's not related to you. I'm sorry. But maybe he is. I don't know. It's your family reunion. I don't know. But he's in there. That's who he is. He's all about shame. And he leads us down this path where we start to think that shame is something that's supposed to be part of who God is. This is one of the greatest lies that Satan has ever sold us, is that God is a God of shame. What does God do when he sees that they are ashamed? What's his first action? Is it to shame them further? No. God kills an innocent animal and takes the skin of that animal to clothe them, to do what? To cover their shame. This is why when Jesus shows up in John 1 and they say, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Who is that? It's an innocent animal who has been brought here for the slaughter so that he would then cover through his blood our shame. He's not a God of shame, but it's one of the greatest lies the enemy's ever told. I don't know if you ever read John, the verse that Tim Tebow wrote, John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only son. We all talk about that verse all the time. We forget the next verse in John 3:17 where it says, "But God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him." He's not here to condemn. That's not the goal. That's the enemy's job because he's constantly going to do that. He is an accuser. He will always be an accuser. That's what he's going to do. He's going to tell little lies about who you are, about how God feels about you. He's going to tell these little lies, and as he tells those lies, we're going to be foolish enough to believe them. John Mark Comer, in his book, Live No Lies, he talks about this consistently. It's a great book. But he actually points out that what we see with Satan is, he says, Jesus sees our primary war, this war between a woman and a dragon. The primary war against the devil is a fight to believe truth over lies. That's the hardest thing we're going to have to understand. So we have to constantly be finding truth, not the lies. And who is the father of lies? What, in John 8, right? We see that Jesus says that you belong to your father, the devil. And the devil is what? He's the father of lies. He's going to lie to you, and one of those lies is going to be that God does not love you. One of those lies is going to be that God is not for you. One of those lies is going to be that God feels shame about you, and you should feel shame about yourself, therefore. It's a dangerous lie, and the problem is most of us fall into it all the time. We fall into this accusation pattern over and over again. We allow the accuser to accuse us. John Mark Comer goes on as he writes more about this, but he says, "We prefer to think of ourselves as rational individualists rather than the emotional, relational, and easily manipulated social creatures we actually are. And we're manipulated all the time by an accuser. And the worst part is, accusation, follow me for a second, but accusation only gets validation when there is agreement. Accusation only gets validation when there's agreement. And here's what I mean by that. I can accuse somebody of something. It does not matter until somebody else accuses them as well, or joins in on that, or believes what I'm saying. Accusation doesn't stand on its own. But once others start to believe that, then it has validity. And here's why I say that. So this is true of other people. We accuse other people. Maybe you've been accused of something, or you've had something happen to you, and you feel like you're accused of something, or you feel like Satan has accused you of something. It only has validation when it's agreed on. And the worst part is, his greatest trick is that he accuses us of something, and then we agree to it. Yeah, I am that way. Yeah, it is that way. Yeah, we are that way. It only has validity when we agree to it, when others agree to it, or when we agree to it ourselves. And the problem is, he's so good at accusing, he's so good at his job, he's so crafty, that many times he's tricked us right into it. We're like, yep, you're right. You're right. The second thing he does, once we've got agreement to that accusation, is we see that there's this revelation that he is leading the world astray. We see this in verse 9. Verse 9, it says, the great danger, or the great dragon was hurled down, the ancient serpent called the devil, or the Satan, Hasatan, who leads the world astray. He's leading the world astray. That's what he does best. And he does it through two different things, and we'll talk about it briefly. One, that I feel very strongly about. One of the things he does to lead the world astray is that he leads us through distraction. He constantly wants to distract us from things, from the most important things, so he distracts us with lesser things. He distracts us with things that are not as important. I blame Sesame Street. This is the way I've always blamed this. If you've ever watched Sesame Street, if you know anything about how Sesame Street was originally designed, it was designed for about 2-minute segments. And on the side, they would put kids in a room. This is true. But they would put kids in a room to watch a segment of Sesame Street. And they would watch one screen with Sesame Street. And next to it, they would have a second projector that was just projecting images. Every about 8 seconds at the time, they would just put up another image. And every 8 seconds, a new image would come up over here. And they would watch, how often did the kids go from the main screen and look at the other screen? How often were they distracted by it? If the kids were not distracted by the other screen, they were doing well. They were keeping your attention the entire time. But if they started to look away, then they were distracted by something else. Let me just say that I think more often than not, Satan is not the distractor screen. He's the main screen that we pay attention to. And I think every maybe 8 seconds, days, months, years, whatever, we pay attention to the other. He's distracting constantly. This is how he operates. John Ortberg says it great, but the way he writes, and again, I've mentioned it before, but he says, for many of us, the great danger is not that we will renounce our faith. No, that'd be too easy. That's too easy for this kind of enemy. If we would just renounce our faith, he would do his job. That's too easy. That's not smart enough. But he says it is that we become so distracted and rushed and preoccupied that we'll settle for a mediocre version of that faith. We will just skim our lives instead of actually living them. That's what he's looking for, right? And if you think about it, the things you give your attention to, we live in an attention economy, but the things you give your attention to at the end of your life, that's what your life is. Your life is a sum of the things that you give your attention to. That's all it is. If you give your attention to your children, that will be the sum of your life. That will see something that will be fruitful in that. But if you give your attention to everything else, that will be the end of your life. That will be the sum of your life. At the end of your life, it'll be like, he was a really great dude. He looked at his phone a lot. Really loved the guy. He really devoted himself to that phone. And he really was interested in that thing. Like we'll bury him with it. God rest his soul. We're distracted constantly. And the end of our lives, that's what the sum of it is. In fact, Amy Rosenthal, she writes just a simple line, but she says, this is why you have to pay attention to what you pay attention to. Pay attention to what you pay attention to. He's so smart. He's so crafty. He's just trying to distract us. The second thing he's doing, though, is not just that he's creating distraction, but he creates what I would call disposition. He's made us believe that certain things just are the way they are. He's just believing, so he leads the world astray by saying, you are the way you are, and the world is the way it is, and there's nothing going to change that. How many times have you heard this? But I mean, seriously, what he's setting up here is there's this idea that's kind of like, hey, your life is just the way your life is. So you're an addict? That's what you are. Like that's what you are. You were born into the house of an addict, well, that's just what you are. That's how it works. You're a person who deals with lust, oh, that's fine. That's what that is. How many times have we heard this one? This one's a good one, by the way. Boys will be boys. Just the way they are. They're going to look at certain things. They're going to do certain things. That's just who they are. It's a lie that Satan has put out there, and guess what he got? He got agreement. And we agreed with it. Said, oh, that's just what we are. I mean, how many times have you heard these lies? Oh, the disposition goes even further than that. I mean, it goes to a cultural level, right? Pornography, it's what everybody does. It's fine. Certain things we watch, yeah, that's normal. That's just the culture we're in, right? Sexuality, yeah, we just go with the flow on that. That's just kind of what it is at this point. It's how it works. I mean, we fall into this, and do you see what's happening? We're giving agreement too. He's saying he's very crafty. He's leading the world astray by doing these things. He's leading us astray. Our morals, our ethics, all of those things move with it. We start to do these same things. Again, John Mark Comer in Live No Lies, he had a quote where he said, we all sin. This is why we sin. Because we believe a lie about what will make us happy. That's where this all comes from. We start to go down this path thinking this will make me happy, and eventually we think that that's the end goal is happiness, and so we start to believe the lies. The last thing we see of this Satan is that he is angry and he is active. At the end of this chapter, verse 17, it says, then the dragon was enraged at the woman and went off to war, to wage war against the rest of her offspring, all of everybody else. Those who keep God's commandment and hold fast their testimony about this Jesus. Guess what? I got bad news. He's still active. He's still moving. And he's real angry. He's very much, remember, he's a red dragon, which means that he's angry. He's in his red era, if you will. It's a tough spot he's in right now. And as he's doing that, as he's angry, he is still searching for people. He's still active and on the move. We can't just sit by with this. This is why John's peeling back the curtain to say there's bigger animating forces. We can't sit by with this. C.S. Lewis says it very well when he writes that there is no neutral ground in the universe. There's no just neutrality. Every square inch, every split second is claimed by God and then counterclaimed by Satan. It's going to be one or the other. There's nothing left to chance. There's going to be over and over again, there's something that's going to be happening because this guy is angry and he is active. I'll just tell you, this week I have had some things where I've felt like there was an attack. And here's the problem. It's not out there. It's in here. Like there's been, anybody have this? Where there's just massive anxiety. There's a voice telling you that you're not whatever it is, good enough, smart enough, and doggone it, people don't like you. Like you feel like I've done something wrong, that maybe you just feel like it's been lingering, it's hanging on to you over and over again. The shame of something just keeps coming up in your mind. The regret you have keeps coming up in your mind. Remember that God is a God of hope, by the way, and hope that is set in the past is called regret. You cannot live there, and so hope is only in the future. It exists in the future, and I keep living in this place of hope that's in the past for some reason. I keep wanting to go back there and fix something. I kept wanting to change something. I had to sit down with a friend of mine who's smarter than me, and which is every friend I have. And we went to eat food, and while we're sitting down, I mean, he's telling me, he's like, here's the thing, and he told me, Kevin, there's an inner critic that's in your brain. And he said, sometimes it's a good thing that you have an inner critic. The inner critic is a good thing, where sometimes it's like it keeps you regulated, it keeps you knowing like good from bad, right and wrong. But there's times where it gets overactive, and right now yours is like a 9 out of a 10, maybe a 10 out of a 10, where you are criticizing yourself to the place where you'll never move forward. And I was giving agreement to it. It wasn't just that it was there, it was that I was agreeing with it. I don't know if you've ever felt this way or you're feeling this way right now. The goal of this passage is to show us that there is victory from that, but also to let you know there is an enemy and he's real and he's doing things. But now that you know who he is, you know how to fight against him. Now that we've called him what he is, now that we've seen him for who he is, you can fight against him. It's not going to be in your own power, but knowing that there is victory on the other side. And guess what? God does win. And so as we're going to sing for just a second. And as we sing, my hope is that if you've been feeling that way, John's going to be back in the prayer room. And I don't know why we don't take advantage of this more. But if there are things you've been dealing with in your own soul, in your own mind, in your own heart, where you've just been feeling like this shame, this weight is just pulling you back. There's an accuser, and guess what? You're agreeing with that accuser. Then my hope is that you'll spend some time in prayer, whether it's right here at your seats or back there with John. I'd love to talk to you after service because, trust me, I'm going through it too. Love to have that conversation. We're going to sing about the power that Jesus has over those things and remind ourselves that he does win, that God does win, that there is victory, and that we find victory in his victory over these things. So if you would, let's stand together as we close. And let's pray. Jesus, we thank you for this message of victory. We thank you for this picture that's been painted that shows us that there is an enemy, and he's real, and he's active, and he's doing stuff, and he's angry, and he's manipulative, and he's trying his best right now. But no matter how hard he tries, that you have already won. I thank you for the reminder that we have that you are our victory, that you have the power, you have the authority, that this is your kingdom that we are living in. And at moments where we feel weak and we feel less than, would you remind us of who you are, how good you are, and how great you are? Would you let us pull back into this picture and see a bigger picture going on, see a bigger painting, a bigger understanding that reminds us that there is good and evil, but that the good that you are will win. We have power in your name. I pray for each person who's feeling that shame in their lives right now, and that they are agreeing with that shame, that you would remove that you would not let the enemy win the battle for our minds and our hearts right now, but that you would help us to find victory in you over those things. We thank you so much for your victory on the cross that still speaks to us today, for your resurrection power over the grave that's still with us today. Thank you for your name that's stronger than any of those things. Pray in your name that's so powerful. Amen.
grateful for each of you. Really thankful that you're all here with us this morning. If you, like Kevin mentioned, John is going to be right in the back here in this prayer area. We encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity. If you're fighting battles in your life or just this week, or even if you just want to talk about dragons, like John is back there and would love to spend some time with you. I'm going to be back at the connection desk. Would love to visit with you just a little bit. We have lots of really, really great handouts on our serving partners that we're working with this summer, a list of our events that are coming up, our gatherings and our serving times this summer and stuff. Unfortunately, the Christmas cantata is not on there yet, but you definitely want to put that on your calendar right away. So step back there, grab some of that stuff and talk to me for just a minute, or you can check those things on your app, where conveniently you can also RSVP to come hang out with the Slavics this afternoon, which we would love for you to do. Thank you all for being here this morning. Hope your week is so blessed, and I'll see you back at the connection desk, and if not, we'll have a great week, y'all.